Welcome to the channel Witness for Jesus. This is Dawn. As my lovely subscribers are aware, this channel talks about the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Bible teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses, also interviews with former Jehovah's Witnesses, recordings of conversations with Jehovah's Witnesses, and also today, something new. I've known about this information for a while, but now I'm ready to talk about it. I have been looking at the accounts of the Jehovah's Witnesses based in the UK who are operating mainly under the charity listed as International Bible Students Association. Now, I don't have the software to show you in real time on the website, but I will be providing screenshots. I'll be providing links. You can download the accounts that I'm talking about here. There's something really interesting in the accounts, and that is, I'll cut to the chase, that is the order. There is a group within the Jehovah's Witnesses called the Order. Now, the name of it on its own raises a few flags for me, because of course we know that certain occultic groups have that as a very common thing, that it's the order of, usually. For instance, I know somebody very well who's a member of the Order of the Bards, Ovates and Druids, as an example. That title is really interesting, and in the accounts of the IBSA, which is International Bible Students Association for short, we see the order with a capital O, and we see money going to them. So I'm going to show you the screenshot. You can see the International Bible Students Association charity page here. It does include overview and the financial documents. It also lists the people who are the trustees. Now, what I want to tell you about here is that if you do any delving at all into the Jehovah's Witness organisation, you'll realise that there are multiple organisations. There isn't just the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. There are multiple groups, charities. Some are not charities, I believe. Some are businesses instead. So, for instance, the International Bible Students Association has this as a charity with trustees, yet the trustees, it states in the financials, are actually directors also of a side company that is called International Bible Students Association also, I believe, and that's actually in the accounts. So I'm going to show you a screenshot of that as well, where it states that they are directors of a company. So, we have these directors, and this is what I wanted to say. In the UK, the people who actually run the Bethel and the people who you'd say are at the very top are not necessarily the trustees. And that happens also in the in the USA, in the very headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses. It is a wrong assumption to say that the governing body are the top people in the Watchtower organisation. The governing body are not, because the governing body are not listed as, for instance, directors or trustees. It's other people who are listed. Now, as far as the USA accounts, I haven't looked at them. At least I may have glanced, but I've not looked in any detail. But what I'm telling you is that you may think the governing body are the ones who govern everything in the Jehovah's Witness organisation, and that would be a mistake. There are people who have the purse strings, who are above them. And in fact, I see the governing body as being basically a front, the people who they put in front of you in a media sense. They're the people, they're the face, I suppose, the face of the governing people within the organisation. Bear in mind, when they have meetings to discuss serious financial matters, they are including the people who are trustees, who are directors, who are, I think there's even one person as a managing director, which should be required actually for any company that the Watchtower has. Now, as far as these records, they're public record. I'm not telling you anything that is wrong to talk about. Public record lists here 6, is it? 5 individuals who are on the trustees of the IBSA. Now, if you look up those 5 individuals, I've heard somebody who I know has told me that it's entirely possible to find those 5 individuals who live in London, UK, and that they're living in very nice properties. Now, I wouldn't say that, except I realised that Watchtower actually do own big houses, and I mean houses in London that are detached with driveways in a rural area. You are looking at a lot of money for one of those houses. I mean, one of them could be worth 3 million, 4 million pounds per house. So I'll prove that in a little while, but before I do, we'll look at the accounts. The 2018 accounts were released. Of course, it takes a while for the 2018 ones to come out. I saw this in 2017 accounts, and I'm seeing it again in 2018 accounts. So we'll go to the accounts where I'll show you a screenshot. Okay, page 3, report of the trustees. It says there that the trustees, who are also directors of the charity for the purpose of the Companies Act 2006, present their report with the financial statements of the charity. Okay, and the aims of the charity are outlined and the significant activities of the charity. Now, I would dispute myself the section on public benefit, because they suggest that these things are of benefit to the public. I would certainly dispute that, because anyone recruited into Watchtower organisation is simply another person to fund and provide donations. It really, as we're aware, the damaging practices within the Jehovah's Witnesses certainly outweigh any so-called public benefit. And the first mention of the order is found in point 3 here, where it says that the benefit is through facilitating the work of Jehovah's Witnesses in general, through property purchase and ownership, as well as taking care of members of the order. We go to the next page for more information about who are in the order. Under workers, it says, the association uses religious ministers who are members of the order to assist with its work. These individuals are not employed and do not receive a salary. Their basic needs are cared for so that they are able to carry out any task which they are assigned as part of their religious service. As such, ones do at times assist the association directly by helping to organise conventions and distributing literature. Many carry out other assignments in harmony with the aims and purposes of the association. Some, for example, visit and assist individuals and congregations throughout the United Kingdom. Others care for large assembly halls used for worship. Others translate Bible-based material that promotes well-being, respect for others, along with such qualities as honesty and kindness. Now, further down that page, we have another section about the order, which says caring for members of the order. During the year, the modest living expenses of 932 members of the order were cared for, in harmony with the aims and purposes of the association throughout the United Kingdom. This enabled them to concentrate fully on their religious service and carry out assignments during the year. These ones are not employed by the association. They do, however, at times assist with the association's activities, and any other service they carry out is in line with the association's aims and objectives. Just a side note there, it says fundraising. We do not engage in fundraising activities. Again, I would dispute that certainly, because they fundraise all the time in the congregation, and I would also call assemblies and conventions huge fundraising activities, because we know during the programme everybody is asked to donate, and that's to apparently cover costs. But people anecdotally have said, haven't they, that there's a lot of profit that goes on at assemblies, because they own the buildings often when it's an assembly especially, and the costs are quite small, really, compared to the donations collected. That is fundraising. That's my opinion there. So now we need to go to the section where we see how much money has been given to the order. A consideration here is that the charity page actually lists the volunteers, the number of volunteers, as 300. Right, and that number, I've heard, is the number of Bethelites at the main office, the main building in London. However, as you just noticed, we heard that the order has 932 members. So where are the other 632 members? Of course, they alluded to circuit overseers or district overseers. I don't think there are district ones anymore, as far as I'm aware. But also they alluded to people who look after property, such as assembly halls. Still seems a lot of people. If you're saying 632 people who are not at Bethel are getting money in terms of this order, it starts to raise a few questions. However, when we look at the actual financial situation, the total assets in 2018 was, in the UK alone, 159,728,555. And that's in terms of property owned mostly. Now, on expenditure, we have caring for members of the order in 2018 is showing at £6,321,335. Now, if we look at Bethelites, I actually don't know how much the Bethelite allowance is. Somebody can enlighten me, please. That'd be good if you could. I'm assuming that it couldn't be really much more than, say, £200 a month, because they're getting all the food paid for and they're getting most things paid for. So this is just for personal expenses. So even if I think that's an overestimate actually, but you know, even if we say that each Bethelite gets £2,400 per annum as an allowance, I'm going to times that by the 300 Bethelites. That's £720,000, okay, on their allowance. Now, we could reasonably assume that their food bill is included in this caring for members of the order figure. So let's just double it. Let's say that it costs a lot for the food as well. So we're looking at 1,440,000. That's for their allowance and for their food. And basically, I'm sure that I'd cover the basics for the Bethelites there. Now, in terms of adding up this in terms of all of the members of the order, we've got 632 members who are not at Bethel, presumably. So they may get an allowance, but I can't see their food being included or anything. Let's just assume that they get an allowance in a similar way. That would be 2,400 times 632. That's another 1,500,000. Okay, so now we're at something like nearly 3 million. Okay, that's nearly £3 million, and that's, I believe, an overestimate, to be honest, because some of the people, they'll be getting much less, I suppose, if you're just somebody looking after a building, let's say. Now, in terms of circuit overseers, they do get I think a flat or somewhere that they live when they're not at the circuit. But again, Watchtower owns a lot of property. Those are not ongoing expenses because they own those properties that people are living in. So even if we say to ourselves, you know, oh, there could be another £500,000 spent on other things, we're still only at about £3.5 million, realistically and reasonably. And here we see that the actual caring for members of the order expense was 6,300,000. So really, we're looking at a lot of money, easily, you know, £2.5 million, that really isn't sort of accounted for in terms of just Bethelite expenses or, you know, general expenses. I mean, we've got other expenditure there that's separate anyway. So I think the point I'm trying to make is this. If you have, let's say, 20 individuals who are at the very top of this organisation in the UK, it would be very, very easy to give those 20 individuals a lot of money out of this figure that's just for members of the order. So let's assume that all your Bethelites and your circuit overseers and people are getting your basic, very basic allowances and just covering their needs and their costs, right? Where's the other £2.5 million going? Even if it isn't that much, even if I've worked the figures out wrong, I can just see that it's very easy for an individual to be in receipt of, let's assume, just pluck a figure out the air, let's assume somebody could be given £250,000, let's say, just to that one individual, and it's part of this figure, because there's no breakdown of exactly how much has been given to who. And it would be very easy, because even the Bethelites are not going to know that, are they? Now, in terms of this being realistic, is it realistic? Am I being ridiculous about this to say that there might be people who are getting £250,000 per annum? Well, firstly, no, because in the UK it's very common, very, very common, for the people at the top of charities to be receiving £200,000, £250,000, maybe more, for the fact that they run the charity. That is not uncommon at all in the UK. Okay, and it's the same thing. It's put into, like, general costs, costs for the volunteers, etc. Now, is it unrealistic? Well, if we look now at the IBSA property website, this is a UK based property website where they're actually selling Watchtower properties off, and this gives you a really good idea of the types of properties that Watchtower own and the reasons why they own them. If I show you now this page, you are going to see so many houses, big houses that are they're beautiful. They're like homes that anyone would absolutely love to live in. There are so many of these on this website. Now, ask yourself, okay, they're selling them off. We know that there's a situation where things are being sold off quite a lot. It's so obvious that people who work for Watchtower were living in these houses, okay, or are still living in these houses until they sell. Why would Watchtower own all these properties? Unless people were living in them previously, and these would have been the guys at the top. Now, I've heard that Watchtower has its own, often has its own doctors, and of course we know they have their own lawyers. And as part of the package for these people who are presumably highly educated, the package is that you get one of these houses and your family can move in. And I'm absolutely certain that if you move into one of these houses and you're a Watchtower doctor, for instance, or you're a Watchtower lawyer, right, you're not going to get a basic expense of a couple of £100 a month. I mean, you've got to pay the bills on this house for a starter. Imagine the huge costs of upkeep on one of these properties, even just heating the property, and all the requirements to feed your family, let's say, in London. It's a lot of money, and I'm pointing this out because what I'm saying to you is that money that's given to the order, more of it must be given to the individuals who are living in these properties. And how much is given to them as so-called reasonable expenses is anybody's guess. We don't know. We just don't know how much, because in theory it could be considered that a salary of X amount is reasonable. It actually says in the accounts that it's in line with the objectives of the charity. Well, that could be anything. That person, we need to give them that because they are the main trustee, the number one, or the one of the 5 trustees, and because of the responsibility they hold, well, we think that that's a good idea to give them that amount of money. But is this right? Really? It begs the question, about transparency really, because if it's the case, then they should be open about that being the case, that people who are donating, such as the rank and file Jehovah's Witnesses, would then know where the money is going, and how exactly the people who are higher up in the organisation are being treated. The fact is that Jehovah's Witnesses around the world believe that the governing body live in Bethel and have basic expenses just like everybody else. And whilst the governing body might live in the property that they've just built, I just cannot believe for 1 second that they don't own other property, and they don't own, say, property in other countries where they can visit, and they don't have other property for their family. I mean, think about it. If you're a governing body member and you've got, say, 3 children and their families, and you're not telling me that they're all not in Watchtower properties. Another thing I need to mention is that there's another charity alongside IBSA in the UK, and that is the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Britain. And it's amazing because that also has 50 volunteers, just 50 people who are under that umbrella. And if you look at the expenditure, it does not include looking after those 50 members as members of the order, but it does interestingly show donations and there's donations of £30 million. Now those donations, really interestingly, they're showing that they're a charity and they're including donations as part of their charitable work, but actually the donations are to other Watchtower corporations and charities. So if you donate £30 million, very much expect that either went up to the head office in the USA, or it went across to IBSA, or it went somewhere. But basically that £30 million was donated to just the organisation. None of this money is going to any other charitable organisation that's not Watchtower based, and that's fairly certain. I can't be 100% certain, of course, but we know that they don't support worldly, so-called worldly charities. They only support themselves. So that's interesting also, and that company has also got huge amounts of money going through it and huge amounts of assets. So that's all part of this discussion. Now the IBSA, interestingly, also have a donation section too, and they've donated over £10 million to other Watchtower corporations. So this is how the money is all moved around, and how, in fact, these charities are then non-profit, because of course, let's say you make £40 million in a year. If you're donating 30 million of that, then that's how you then don't show a profit, but it's going to your other companies that you own. And that's the interesting part, isn't it? And it seems to me that this thing called the Order is just really, even the name of it, as I mentioned earlier, just brings up questions really. How long have they been called that, I wonder? I've heard also that Bethelites must sign a document to submit to being a member of the order, and also it includes non-disclosure agreements. So non-disclosure means that even when you leave the order, assuming you can leave without recompense, which is another thing, when you leave it, you can't, there's certain things that you cannot disclose still, because Watchtower is, as we know, a multi-billion pound or $1 billion organisation, and they will litigate. And this came up in a discussion that I had with somebody who's doing a lot of exposing of the Watchtower at the moment. There's a Facebook page run by someone called Nathan, and it's called watchtowerjw.org facts and resources. I'll give you a screenshot of that so that you can look it up on Facebook. He's been putting some information on there about all kinds of scandalous things, but he didn't know about this order thing, so I informed him today. But we were discussing about the non-disclosure, and I said that whilst I love the fact that Raymond Franz wrote Crisis of Conscience, I did feel when I was reading it a number of years ago that there were clearly things missing, including this information about who are the directors and about money and about things that are could be more scandalous, including what pies they've got their fingers in. We all know that they were members of the United Nations. So what pies, what other places are they invested in? We know that it's been exposed that one particular investment fund that they got donated to them is shares in military and other questionable companies that Watchtower still profit from. So I feel that even Franz and others who may have left the organisation and left Bethel are still tied to not providing some information, because they would definitely face litigation should they disclose certain things. It seemed strange to me that Franz could have written the book without any response from Watchtower, and I thought perhaps they even had, there could have been discussion before that book was released, you know, about what can and cannot go in the book. I can't be sure of this. I'm just saying that it is a bit of speculation, that, but I'm trying to tell you that if the accounts in black and white show that more money is being paid out than basic expenses based on their own declared number of volunteers, then the money is going somewhere, and that is being given to members of the order, as we discussed. So they can't put it in the accounts as going to members of the order if it's not going to members of the order. So it has to be the expenses, and it just doesn't add up. The figures don't add up. So even be aware, I saw a video by an ex-Bethelite fairly recently actually, and he was saying that he thought that the governing body were kind of innocent in a way, that they really believed the things they're teaching, and, you know, that they're genuine and things like that. Even though he disagreed with the organisation, he's basically saying that he thought they were genuine. Personally, I don't think so, and the reason I don't think so is because the evidence is in the literature and in the way that things are hidden. How is it possible for them to be innocent and really believe in what they believe when they are clearly hiding information that they're not putting on jw.org, and they're not telling the rank and file? Okay, so that's deceptive in itself because it's not transparent. They are clearly releasing Watchtower articles that are damage control articles, such as the recent child abuse article. It's damage control, pure and simple. And they are documented as having lied and made flip-flops in their teachings. Not just flip-flops in the teachings, but outright printing something that's straight out not true. Even when I did the video on cross or stake, for instance, the sources that they're quoting, they're misquoting, they're taking it completely out of the meaning that the original scholar, you know, had. They're doing these things deliberately. There's no way at all that governing body could be walking around thinking, oh yes, you know, this is really the truth and God's organisation. They must know. You can't get to that level and not know. And as I mentioned near the beginning of this, they themselves are under influence. Is it possible for a governing body member at that level to leave without major consequences? Maybe Franz was blessed in the sense that he didn't have children, but you're looking at major repercussions if you leave. And when there's people above you, and when you've got non-disclosure, and there's all kinds of things, imagine what happens at that level in that kind of organisation, that kind of company. We know they're rubbing shoulders with other major corporations in the world, and we know that there's background that Russell, even from the get-go, was close with some of the major players in the world back then. So there's quite a lot there, really. And the rank and file, unfortunately, believe that this is the true religion, but really it's a profit-making corporation. There's so much evidence of that. I thought you'd be interested in knowing that about the UK accounts and about the order. I'd be really, really interested if somebody can push this forward and maybe look at the USA accounts and see how much was given in the USA relative to how many Bethelites there are there. That'd be really fascinating to find out. We know that there's so much to find out, but often we don't have time, do we, to delve and to do things like that to really discover what's going on. Please subscribe to this channel. So I hope this has been helpful, and as I say, subscribe, please share, get this information out there. God bless.